You're listening to The Endless Party with your hosts,
Megan Elijah Armstrong.
Welcome back to The Endless Party.
Hello, everybody.
We're so grateful you all are here. First of all, thank you for 100 subscribers.
100 subs!
We're on our way to 1 million, yo.
We're on our way to 1 million, and
Don't sleep on The Endless Party.
don't sleep on the endless party. The future is looking very bright.
Yes.
Speaking of future, actually, no, this isn't relatable at all. So currently we're filming. It's May 2nd, and we woke up to snow.
Idaho, man. What can you do? Kind of a bummer, but
It was a little bit of a bummer, but
it's all good.
it's all good because of the topic we're going to discuss actually in this podcast.
Yes. And that is
Thought.
thought. It's as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. That's a scripture, in case you were wondering. But it also comes from probably one of the most well-known self-help books out there, and it's by James Allen, and it was written forever ago. But the knowledge is timeless.
What he shares is actually quite incredible. It's
It
very
is.
empowering.
Beautiful. It's really well written. A lot of analogies to gardens. But anyways, it's actually really good. So
It's really good. And actually what it helps you do is when you wake up on May 2nd and it's snowing, it doesn't have to get you down.
your
You can
mind.
control yourself even when your environment is like uncontrollable.
Garbage.
Snow in May.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I think we'll open with this quote. And actually, this quote I first read it from a little teeny quote packet that you gave me. So, best gift ever. He gave me this like packet. It's not a
Guys out
packet,
there,
it's almost like sticky notes
take
of
notes.
like quotes. Anyways, and I get to go through them, read them, share them. Anyways, so the quote goes, "Your mind is a garden, your thoughts are the seeds. The harvest will bring either flowers or weeds." This is by William Wordsworth. And I think it's pretty cool because to have a beautiful garden, we're talking pumpkins, flowers, like an actual garden.
Beautiful.
You have to tend it daily. And to have a beautiful mind, you have to do the same.
Yep. It's actually interesting because one thing that I've come to understand is we don't always have control of what enters our mind, but we have control of what we allow to harbor there.
Yes.
And so bad thoughts, evil thoughts, nasty thoughts,
They're going to come.
naughty thoughts, they're going to happen. However, we don't have to dwell on them, and we don't have to allow them to remain in our minds. We can choose to think better thoughts, cleaner thoughts, more wholesome, more moral, stronger, powerful, whatever you want to call it, thoughts.
Sure. So I think going back to the garden, regardless of how you take care of it, it's going to wield something.
Yes.
So if you take care of your garden, maybe you'll get vegetables and flowers and all the good things. And if you don't tend your garden, it will wield it will yield.
It will what?
wield yeeds. No, I was
You're yeeting something in your mouth.
No, it's supposed to say it will yield weeds, not wield yeeds. Okay, it will yield weeds. So
Yes.
it's either gonna
It'll grow
yield.
weeds.
It's gonna either yield flowers or weeds. So, but that's something that's that Elijah and I actually talk about a lot is sometimes people are like people think you can just remain at a certain point. Like
Oh, yes. So, for
if you're on a
example,
scale and progression's up and digression is down, people think they can stay stagnant somewhere in the middle.
can't.
You can't.
it's garbage. It's actually interesting because I think life is like an escalator that you're running up, but it's pushing you down. So either you are progressing or you're digressing. You never remain constantly the same. So, for example, we'll use a little sports analogy because me and Meg were little athletes at one point in our lives. Yeah.
That was me running.
Super fast. So, if we all of a sudden just sat out for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 months, whatever it was.
This is a great analogy.
Do you really believe that we would be able to go and like just run the 4-minute mile that I used to be able to run?
No.
No, because you digress. You no longer are progressing. You no longer are working towards that end goal or trying to improve yourself. And what's crazy is people believe that you can just remain constant in life, not just in athletics or physicality. They think their mental capacity just is like, oh, if I don't read, if I don't continue to learn, I'll just stay at what I am.
And I'll still be good.
Another example of this, try to go and do math of a 5th grader currently if you haven't done math in years.
I don't know if I could.
You can't. I'm telling you, it's hard.
Our poor babies, they're gonna.
Well,
we're gonna have to do a refresher.
Remember that TV show that was called "Are You Smarter Than a 5th Grader"?
Yes.
Yeah, most people weren't smarter than the 5th graders. Why? Because they weren't continually learning. They weren't continuing to grow.
There you go. So,
I digressed.
How do you tend your mind garden daily? Well, we're gonna give you a couple suggestions of things, things to consider.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about, and all of these thoughts come from As a Man Thinketh.
Yes.
So we're going to kind of go through the book, and give our 2 cents on what James Allen said.
What the legend himself had to say.
Okay, first thing we're going to talk about is thought and character. So a man is literally what he thinks, and his character
You are what you believe you
is
are.
the complete sum of his thoughts.
Yes.
So, if you want to develop a noble and godlike character, it isn't something that's like a favor or chance, but it's the natural result of continued effort and right thinking. So, there you go.
Yeah.
Your character is what you think.
Yeah, you are what you believe you are. And what's actually interesting, there's a quote that I really like. It's, you can be more than you are. But it starts with believing that you can be more than you are. A lot of us are complacent in who we are or what we are, or we think our lot is so hard, or we believe that we are just a failure. And here's the craziest part. If you believe it, it's true. If you believe you're a failure, it's true. We're actually going to read a poem later. It's actually quite fun.
It's a really fun poem.
It's a fun poem.
So stay tuned.
But it's also has a lot of golden nuggets in there that will help put this into a simpler perspective.
There you go. So, thought and character. Your character is what you think. Mm-hmm. Okay, moving on. The effect of thought on circumstance. This is my favorite one. I have been so into this understanding lately. I feel like I've been talking to you almost every day about it. Okay, here we go. So if you are the master gardener of your soul and the director of your life, then circumstances do not make you. It reveals you to yourself.
What?
So it's kind of deep, but what we're trying to say is I feel like in this world we live in, everyone says, I am who I am because of my circumstances.
It's garbage.
Because of who my parents are, because of where I went to school, because of this, because of that.
Speaking nonsense.
Because of my circumstances, I am who I am. But your circumstances don't make you who you are. What they do is they reveal you to yourself. So the way in which you choose to react or act in your circumstances is who you are. Mm-hmm. You always have the opportunity to shape what you're going to do in those circumstances. And by doing so, therefore, you actually can control your circumstances. Mm-hmm. For example, let's talk about our situation. So a couple years ago, we moved to this place. And I'm going to be real, the first year was...
It was really hard.
It was really hard. And,
Idaho is not for the faint of heart.
It's not for the faint of heart. And also, I feel like I had this terrible habit of being my life is awful because we live in Idaho. Because of the circumstance of living in Idaho, my life is horrible. And I don't like it here. And it's all Idaho's fault. And I was just being a little goopty.
A little storm cloud,
A little goopty storm cloud. However, you go through a C-section and twins, and you're like, okay, life is actually, it's not Idaho that is, making these circumstances hard. It's me. I'm the one who's saying Idaho's the worst, and so of course I hate living here and blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
But this year I've been really focusing on this mentality that you can thrive anywhere. You can be happy anywhere. And because of that, I feel like I, and you too, we've really been able to change our circumstances into something that has been beautiful. I have no problem living here. Is it my dream to have snow on May 2nd? No, it's not. I do enjoy the sun. I enjoy different climates, but life's good. Mm-hmm. Life's really good.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So there's some type of quote. I can't even remember exactly word for word. So if you know it, comment what it actually is. But it reads something along the lines of, if you want to know the measure of a man's character, see what makes him angry.
Yeah.
And so it's actually interesting because so many people have, in my life, I've seen that are financial giants, that are business gurus, that are incredible coaches, incredible athletes, all the things, all of a sudden become so little
mice
because what makes them angry is so petty and little. And so it's pretty astounding. And so what we're actually trying to express here is that you can control that. You can control your mind, you can control your thoughts, you can control even your emotions and how you react and respond to situations. And so, for example, this kind of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about. And it's the difference between reacting and responding.
That's what I was trying to say.
So, for example, our situation is such that it snowed today on May 2nd, which is a bummer. I'm gonna be real. Like, it's just kind of, it's just kind of sad. It's not Christmas time, It's summertime.
It's 5 months past Christmas.
Yeah. So, anyways, but what you can do is you can either react or respond. And here's the difference. If a doctor comes into you and says, "Hey, your body is reacting to the medication we gave you," you get nervous. Because that's not a good thing.
And interestingly enough, you stop taking it.
Yes.
Normally. You'll just pull yourself out of that,
Yeah, so if all of a sudden you bust out in hives with a painkiller, that's your body reacting to the painkiller. However, if your body responds to the painkiller, that means that you are seeing the positive results of it. And so that's how we can choose to face life, is we can either choose to react or respond to our environment. Mm-hmm. And so react is negative, respond is positive. So you can control that all by starting to control your thoughts.
Yes, it kind of goes along with James Allen says. He goes, men are anxious to improve their circumstances, but are unwilling to improve themselves. Therefore, they remain bound.
That blows my mind.
If you want to improve your circumstances, improve yourself.
Yeah.
We still live in Idaho. That hasn't changed. But what did I do? I tried to improve myself, improve my thinking, and tried to, make this place as much of a home. Yeah. Try to make this place
There's
as much of a home.
There's another quote by, I'm just full of quotes today.
He's full of knowledge, man.
There's a quote by Jim Rohn that says, if you want to earn a living, work on your job. If you want to earn a fortune, work on yourself. And it's actually interesting is there's also another quote that says the world will pay you largely what it believes you're worth. So make yourself worth more. That's just it,
Just like that.
You gotta
work on yourself.
You gotta just be the best you can be. And if you're not, guess what? You can change. You can improve.
It's beautiful.
Thanks, Alma.
Next thought is about suffering, which is another thing I really like.
Bleak.
It is bleak.
It's about suffering.
Here's the thing.
So you're gonna suffer.
All of us suffer in this life, but you're gonna be happy about it.
Yeah, sorry.
All of us suffer in this life, but
suffering is inevitable in this life.
But why do we suffer? And James Allen says we suffer because of our weakness, and thereby working through suffering, we're able to mold and shape and refine those parts of ourselves that are rocky, sharp and we can smooth them out and become, you know,
Better.
virtuous and become better. And a lot of times I think that we suffer because we're good. Oh,
Yeah, which is so
I suffer
garbage. I
because
don't understand
because I'm so good.
I'm so
This is really
righteous.
hurting me. Or
I'm suffering. No, you're not. That, like, when has God ever condemned somebody for being good?
never. So we suffer because of our weaknesses and because of our rough edges. But something that I think is so interesting is I think it can even come back to thought. I think we suffer because we choose to suffer. Don't get me wrong. There are hard things that happen.
Of course.
You know, and yes, but I don't think we have to suffer through them. I think there are resources, and I think through Christ we can. I don't think we really have to suffer in this life if we
agree.
turn to the right sources and if we make our mentality as such.
Mm-hmm. So, Jordan Peterson, I just finished his second book, Beyond Order. I think that's what it's called.
And
12 More Rules.
we're gonna do a whole podcast on it. I'm gonna read
Probably.
it. We
that
really
dude's
like
just
him.
a gem.
And here's the thing too that we want to say. What's so interesting about his books and that I want to vouch for is everybody thinks he's this hard right, crazy conservative who's just insane, but actually he
He's just a
speaks
very
like
logical
he
man.
speaks facts. He speaks from his experience as a
Well,
psychologist.
it's actually pretty cool because he actually talks about the benefits to having both the liberal ideals and the
we
conservative
shouldn't
ideals.
be red. We shouldn't be blue. We should be some shade of purple, guys.
Sure. Yeah, purple. Anyways, so back to his last
to Jordan
principle
Peterson.
that he has in his book, and it says you should be grateful in spite of your suffering. And he talks about how we all deal with loss. So, for example, if we lose a loved one or somebody that we cherish or a dear friend, that's really hard. That is a form of suffering, but he advises everybody that we should be courageous in that suffering. And in so doing, we're able to draw upon ourselves and realize the power within our own character. And so it's pretty profound because, like he says, we should be grateful in spite of our suffering, but then even James Allen takes it a step further and says, you don't even have to suffer. And being Christians, we can even take it one step further and take it to Christ.
We can give him our
We
suffering.
can take our suffering away, which is pretty awesome.
Pretty profound.
Yeah.
I think this idea makes me think of the countless stories you hear of people who have, you know, these conditions of suffering. You know, I'm thinking of like physical maladies. You know, who was the guy who lost his legs or something?
Oh, well, Nick Vujicic.
Yes.
I don't know how to say his last name. He was born without legs and arms.
He should be. His life. In my mind, without legs and arms, I feel like my life would be miserable.
Yeah, but what's astounding is he
doesn't
became
suffer.
a motivational speaker. He wrote a book, and he is hilarious.
And his life is far from that.
Yeah, he's married. I'm pretty sure he has kids. Like, he lives his life to the fullest. And technically speaking, other people would view that as suffering. But
He doesn't.
in turn, he actually turned his greatest weakness into his greatest strength, which is astounding.
That's why I feel like in this life, with the right mentality and as Christians with Christ,
Controlling your thoughts.
and turning to Christ, I think anything is possible.
Yeah,
I believe it,
100%.
like so wholeheartedly. Okay, moving on. Next, we're going to talk about the effect of thought on health in the body. And this is actually something...
This is actually kind of cool because I'm next to positive my wife has avoided sickness just on the fact that she tells herself that she's not sick.
Guys, the other day, I was coming down with something. I know I was.
Here's what's crazy. I got sick.
You know what I did? Took some vitamin
We did the
C,
exact same things
drank some tea,
physically,
and I just thought
but
health,
I didn't do
prosperity.
I didn't do the thinking part, and I was sick,
And I wasn't.
and Meg wasn't. Granted, it might be the fact that I had an autoimmune disease for a few years and she didn't.
And it could be the fact that the weather just so abruptly
It's
changed back
garbage.
to winter. So,
However, I believe wholeheartedly that she thought herself healthy.
since the babies have come, I'm like, I
Well, actually,
do not want to be sick.
Here's a crazy story. This comes from a book called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie. He also wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. Great author.
good
You
books.
should read the books. But he actually tells a story about this guy who was had a lifelong illness. And then finally the doctors did an examination on him, and they said, hey, you're going to die in a week. And so he's like, well, forget this. I'm dead
I'm
anyways.
living.
So he went, bought a ticket to a cruise, started living, ate all the food. He started exercising. He started everything. He was no longer ill. Like, he lived for another, like, 30 or 40 years or something. And they told him that you are going to die next week. But because he was like, I'm dead anyways, let me start living. And so all of a sudden he's thinking, I'm going to live. And he did.
My thing is, like,
Amazing.
we have twins. That is amazing. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
We have twins. I'm a mom, and the only thing harder than like working with twins would be working with twins sick. So I'm like, that's just not an option for me. And so my body, it goes with it.
She's a legend, bro. She's a hero.
Anyways, James Allen explains the body is the servant of the mind. Strong, pure, happy thoughts will build the body up in grace. And a change of diet will not help a man who will not change his thoughts. So protect your body by guarding your mind, and renew your body by beautifying your mind.
This is actually cool too. I just thought about this because I'm going to share this if you're okay with it. It's about like our process to babies.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So me and Meg, I should say Meg, but like it's a group effort,
It's a group effort, but
So we tried to get pregnant
a couple of times.
a few times, and she actually had miscarriages at like 13 and 14 weeks, which is sad, which is a hard thing to go through. However, we also realized that this is a common occurrence in so many women across the world, and it's a hard thing to deal with. But what was astounding is how many stories out there of these women who were adopting kids because they found out that they couldn't have children, and they tried and tried and tried for years and years and years. And then as soon as they were in the process of adopting kids, they had this mindset of, I'm going to have a baby. And then they get pregnant and have a baby. And I'm going to be real, that has to do with your thoughts, because your thoughts really are the master of your body. And that's just one example. Or like the guy that was sick, who was going to die within a week, and then he changed his entire life, and now he lives for years and years and years. I can even think back to a million different sports examples. For example, I think most people know this, Michael Jordan in one of the NBA finals was sick as a dog.
He played his like unreal.
He played unreal. And during the game, he wasn't sick. Anytime on the sidelines, he was sick.
So cool, right?
I mean, it's pretty astounding what the human body can do when it is subject to the will of the mind.
Pretty amazing. I think I was reading, I think it was Power Positive Thinking, I'm not sure. And this percentage is a ballpark, so whatever. I think it said that like 78% of illnesses we take to the doctors are like construed in our minds or something.
Oh, yeah.
However, here's the thing. I'm not to say, get medical help if you need medical help. There's a time to take medicine. There's a time to go to the doctor. But also, I encourage you to, try to use your mind.
Yeah.
To heal yourself.
Like, in no way are we saying if you break your leg today that you should just be like, my leg is not broken.
Go get
you need to go
proper
see
medical attention.
doctor.
No.
What was the other example that I was going to use?
Well, I have an example.
Okay, go ahead.
It's also from Norman Vincent Peale. There was this woman who came in, and she was sick and tired, and she just looked like gray. And I've actually seen a couple of examples of this in my own life where
Pretty sad.
people's mindset just gets so dark and depressing that their body starts to like manifest that in their like aura and in their skin tone. But anyways, this woman sought out Christ and changed her thoughts and started to live, and she beautified her body in the sense that she was alive and she had youth again. And she came back to Norman Vincent Peale, and he didn't recognize her. He didn't, because she came back a couple years later, and she was this whole new person, and she'd like reconstructed her life based on these like positive thoughts. And he goes, I'm sorry, like I don't recognize you. Who are you? And she goes, I was the woman who came in,
glum, gloomy, and sad.
And she fixed, she switched her mentality and, restored health to her body.
Pretty incredible.
I think it's pretty
astounding. Really.
All right, moving on.
Yeah.
Moving on. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about thought and purpose. If you make your purpose like the centralizing point of your thoughts, that's a really great way to shape your thoughts. So for example, mine and Elijah's purpose that we've kind of come to understand and develop together is we want to do as much good as we can for as many people as we can.
That means all of you.
That means all of you. And we want to do it, and the way we're going to do it is we're choosing to do it in the form of this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So this podcast,
One way. We're
one
gonna
way.
do it a lot of
We're going to do it
ways,
in a lot of ways, but
this podcast
this
is
is
definitely
the
one
way.
of them.
So anyways, one of the ways we're doing it is this podcast, and because of that, this podcast is in the center of our minds all the time. And what's pretty cool is because we talk about these principles on this podcast, and because, a lot of our time, free time is dedicated to this podcast, it's pretty cool the way that our thoughts have kind of shaped around it.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool too because we have to start living by what we say on
yes,
this podcast.
If we have to practice what we preach, but it's been amazing.
Because there's a lot of people who listen to this and we're like,
we have to do what we
What?
say, or else
Yeah.
we're just
hypocrites. Nobody likes hypocrites.
Yeah. Okay. That's the first thing. And then the second thing about purpose is having a purpose can help you to conquer doubt and fear. And he who has conquered doubt and fear has conquered failure.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There you go.
There's actually, when I think back to my career as an athlete, any time that I ever went in absolutely confident and what was that? What did you just say? The thing about fear.
Oh, doubt and fear. He who has conquered doubt and fear has conquered failure.
That's what it is. So anytime I conquered doubt and fear, that I went in absolutely confident, I ran incredibly well. But if I went in fearing the competition, or fearing even just the clock,
Or even if I said like, oh, I'm so nervous, I don't know how I'm going to do.
yeah, it was garbage.
I didn't do as well.
We did really poorly. So, yeah. So, what we're saying, though, is if you're able to conquer that, you're able to conquer pretty much anything.
Okay, so purpose kind of goes along with this next section. It's all about your visions and ideals. And James Allen says that the dreamers are the saviors of the world.
That's right.
And I love that because it's the people with dreams who make this world a better place, who bring new things to the table. It's just cool.
There's a scripture that actually says, where there's no vision, the people perish. And it's actually interesting because there's also another reference or quote. It's kind of more of a bleak quote, but it's like, most men die at 35 but aren't buried until 75. And it's because a lot of these people don't have vision, that it's been beat out of them by the mundane, the mediocre, the 9 to 5, whatever it is that you want to call it. And because of that, they lose their vision, they lose their passion, they lose what drives them each and every day. And because of it, they die. They don't die physically, but their spirit just diminishes.
Right. So how do you combat that? Well, one thing is, in the scriptures, countless times, there's this idea that it's like, ask and then ye shall receive.
Ask and ye shall receive. Knock and it shall be opened unto you.
So dream lofty dreams, and as you dream, so you will become.
Yes.
You will become your dreams, and you can become the ideals of your heart.
Yeah. It's actually another interesting thing. I think it comes from this book. It says, a man becomes that which he secretly harbors.
Yes.
And then Marcus Aurelius says, never desire anything that needs walls and curtains, which is pretty cool. So when I think about this, it's like, look within yourself and look to see what the desires of your heart are. And if they are not aligned with what you want your values and beliefs to be, then you need to change the desires of your heart, because quickly you will become this awful person. Whereas on the flip side, you can become somebody great.
You can become your dreams.
You can become your greatest version of yourself just by simply believing.
And you can be like, you can quite literally and metaphorically become that $1 million man.
Yes.
You can.
You can become $1 billion
You can become a $2 billion man.
Yeah.
Okay.
2 billion.
Last section, and then Elijah's gonna read the fun little poem. So last section is all about serenity. And
serenity.
only the wise man, only he whose thoughts are controlled and purified, makes the winds and the storms of the soul obey him.
Have any of you ever had a friend or a family member or somebody close to you, or even somebody that you just admire and respect, just be in so much control that is why you admire and respect them?
Yes.
Like somebody that you see and you are like, wow, like you handled that situation like incredibly well. Like there's actually another story. Freak, full of them today. There's a story of this young man who him and his father ran a junkyard, and his father got really, really ill, and so his son started to run the junkyard when he was about 15 years old, completely by himself. But people started to take advantage of this because it was just a 15-year-old kid, so things started to go missing from the junkyard all the time. Transmissions, engines, whatever they found in this junkyard. Finally, this 15-year-old kid was sick of people taking advantage of his dad's misfortune. And so he finally just got up the courage and started confronting people. First person he confronts, okay, it was another young man who was stealing a transmission. And he was about to, this 15-year-old kid was about to deck this kid in the face and just, give it to him and then take him to the police. And his dad's infirm, feeble hand comes and rests on his son's shoulder. And he's like, hey, I can see that you're pretty upset. Why don't you let me handle this? So he takes this kid who just stole a transmission back to the main office. And he says, son, why are you stealing this transmission? And this kid relays the story of how his family has no car and he's trying to fix the car and blah, 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 blah. And so this guy, he's like, what's wrong with your car? Turns out that he has his clutch is the problem and a few other things. And so the guy just gives him the clutch. He gives him the transmission. He gives him everything that he needs to fix this car. And then he says, son, you don't need to steal. Just ask for it. People are always willing to help. And then the 15-year-old that was about to punch this kid's lights out was like, my dad taught me a valuable lesson that day. And he taught me what it actually means to be Christ-like, what it means to be more than we can be, right? And so it was just an incredible story because that's the type of person that you can be. Here's this guy literally stealing from you, and he was able to talk himself out. And side note, the young man actually paid back everything.
Oh my word.
He came back every single month with his paycheck to pay for the clutch, the transmission.
That's amazing.
And eventually, this is cool too, he came to Jesus because of this old man's example.
Wow.
But that's the type of character that we're talking about, is we can all become that simply by believing it and by thinking the proper thoughts and by taking in what the best this world has to offer.
There you go. Self-control is strength, right thought is mastery, and calmness is power.
Yeah.
So we'll end with that. That's kind of a recap of James Allen.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're going to move on to the fun little poem.
Yeah.
Elijah's fun little poem.
Okay,
so let's do
this
it.
has a lot of different names. Okay. It's called Thinking, or it's called The Man Who Thinks He Can, or Whether You Think You Can or Think You Can't, You're Right. So it says, if you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you'd like to win but think you can't, it's almost a cinch you won't. If you think you'll lose, you've lost, for out in the world we find success begins with a fellow's will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. You've got to think high to rise. You've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win a prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but soon or late the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. That is by Walter D. Wintle, and it was actually something that I would recite to myself in my athletic career, because I very, very rarely was I the tallest on the line. I don't think I ever was the tallest on the line, to be honest.
I wasn't either. That's why I can laugh.
That's right. Our girls have a very petite future,
Yes,
as
they
the
do.
doctor
A
said.
bright but
A
petite,
bright but petite
future.
We're not very big people. Anyways, what was amazing about this is right at the end it says, life's battles don't always go to the stronger, faster man, but sooner or later the man who wins is the man who thinks he can. And so that's what we want to end with today, is start believing in yourself. Start believing that you can achieve greatness, and you'll be able to. Because what's crazy is that, like we talked about earlier, is the mind is the master of the body. And as soon as you start believing that you can achieve greatness, your actions show, like, your actions begin to pattern themselves after that thought. And you begin to achieve greatness.
So start with your thoughts. You can if you think you can. And we will catch you next time. So
Until next time.
Thank you for being here.
Yes.
And if you're listening instead of watching on YouTube, please subscribe, okay?
Yeah, go subscribe to our
this.
YouTube. Go subscribe to Spotify, all the things.
Subscribe.
Okay. Thanks, guys. You've been listening to The Endless Party. Please feel free to join us over at our website, theendlessparty.com, for more of our content. Also, we would love to hear from you. Leave some comments and let us know what you're interested in us talking about.
Seriously, like, subscribe, leave a 5-star rating, whatever it is the platform says to do, so that we can keep partying together.